Welcome. Today, I'd like to show you how to use a Bunsen burner. Before we get started, let's go over the parts of the Bunsen burner and what each of those parts are for. We'll start with the base of the Bunsen burner. It's the only part of your Bunsen burner that should come in contact with your benchtop. So it's important to keep your benchtop clutter-free whenever you're using the Bunsen burner so that you don't accidentally knock it over. Built into that base, we have a barbed gas inlet. That gas inlet is attached to a rubber hose, and that rubber hose is in turn attached to a gas valve. Whenever you're using a Bunsen burner, you don't want to attempt to control how much gas goes into the burner using this gas valve. Instead, you should use the needle valve. Now, technically, a Bunsen burner that has a needle valve is called a Turille burner, but most people will refer to this as a Bunsen burner Turille style, so we're just going to call it a Bunsen burner. The needle valve gives you fine control over how much gas is delivered to the barrel. At the bottom of that barrel, we have an adjustable collar, and that collar controls how much air is mixed in with the gas. We'll talk a little bit later about what that does to the flame, but that's what we use it for. At the top of the barrel, we've got the mouth. Now, just as a word of caution, when you've been using your Bunsen burner for a while, the mouth, the barrel, and even the collar can get pretty hot. Of course, the whole reason that we use a Bunsen burner is to produce a flame. We'll talk a little bit later in this video about how to control that flame using both your needle valve and your collar. But before we move on to the video part, there's one last thing I want to point out, and that is a striker. We use the striker to light the flame. Here's a closer look at the striker. It uses a piece of flint to scrape a metal cylinder to produce sparks. Sometimes that flint can get worn down. If that happens, it's easy to replace. Simply unscrew the old flint and screw a new one back on. When using the striker, you need to apply enough force to the arm of the striker so that a spark is produced. I recommend testing out the striker a few times before turning on the gas. You'll need to attach a rubber hose securely to the barbed gas inlet. You should always check your hose for cracks, holes, and splits. If you start to see the rubber cracking like it is here, it's time to replace that hose with a new one. Sometimes you'll even see the rubber hose start to split like it does here. Again, this hose should be replaced before using your Bunsen burner. Once you've attached your Bunsen burner to the gas valve, I recommend closing the air inlet on the collar and turning the needle valve all the way to the fully closed position. Then, turn on your benchtop gas valve to the on position and open up your needle valve just enough to allow the gas to flow. Then, use your striker to light the Bunsen burner. Because the collar on the barrel is all the way closed, you should get a yellow flame, which is sometimes called a safety flame. You should never heat objects in the lab with a safety flame, but it's the safest way to light a Bunsen burner. To adjust your flame, open the collar a bit to allow more air to mix in with the gas. As the collar is opened more, you'll get a steady blue flame, which is appropriate for heating things like round bottom flask or mild heating of an evaporating dish or crucible. However, if you want a hotter flame, continue to open up the collar to allow even more air in. Eventually, you will get a flame that appears to have a bright blue inner cone. That indicates that your flame is very hot and ready to heat porcelain crucibles to a steady orange glow. Near the tip of that inner cone is going to be the hottest part of the flame. When lighting a Bunsen burner, don't attempt to light the flame directly underneath your object. In this example, you might accidentally knock over and damage your crucible, and you could potentially injure yourself or your lab partner. Instead, pull the Bunsen burner away from the crucible stand and light it. Then, adjust the collar to get the desired flame intensity. You could fine-tune the collar to get the tip of the bright blue inner cone right at the base of your crucible. After just a minute or two, the base of your crucible will start to glow. After several more minutes, the crucible and clay triangle will glow even brighter. In fact, if you tilt the lid of the crucible back a bit so that you can see inside, you will see that the inside of the crucible will glow. This is the ideal condition for baking off any impurities on your crucible before doing an experiment. When heating a glass object like a round bottom flask or beaker, you want to use the steady blue flame that doesn't have the bright blue inner cone. Even with this milder flame, it's best not to heat the glass directly with the flame, as that might cause the glass to break. To avoid breakage, chemists prefer to use a wire mesh with a ceramic center. The mesh will help to distribute the heat evenly and reduce the chance of breaking your glassware. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed learning about how to safely use a Bunsen burner. If you have any additional questions or if you have suggested topics for future videos, let us know in a comment below. Also, consider subscribing to the channel so that you don't miss our upcoming videos. I promise we've got some good ones planned. Thank you again.